Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to everyone present in the chamber and indeed listening online to this morning's business of the Lincolnshire County Council Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee. I am Councillor Ian Carrington, I'm the chairman of the committee, and Councillor Martin Griggs, vice chairman, is also in attendance. A few housekeeping notes. The audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online. We have no fire drill planned for this morning, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the chamber, exit the building at that end, through reception, and assemble in the front car park and await further instructions. And please ensure that your mobiles, laptops, iPads, and any other device are now set on silent, and for those who need it, the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak. Getting a certain amount of feedback there. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. Please indicate early when you wish to speak, and we will now move to the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence and replacement members. Jess Wassey-Yates, please report.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Austin and Councillor Cook this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further apologies on the floor? Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. I suspect that Linda Wotton will not be coming to today's meeting.
Thank you very much. We will log those. Item 2, declaration of members' interests. This is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest? I'm seeing none at the moment. If something does become evident to you in the course of the meeting, please just catch the chairman's eye and you may declare it then. Now, before we move any further, I would like to acknowledge the attendance of Dr. Caroline Johnson, MP, who is with us via a video link in relation to item 5 on the agenda, and she will shortly address the committee. For this same item, we're also in the presence of the Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT, Councillor Richard Davis, and Executive Support Councillor for Economic Development, Environment and Planning, Councillor Tom Dyer. Mr Hamish Falconer, MP, the MP for Lincoln, has given his apologies to our invitation. However, we hope to hear from him and join forces toward achieving our goals with the future of the project subject of item 5, which is, of course, the Highcombe Relief Road. Now, in the interest of giving all the contributors present the opportunity to attend to other business, I'm going to propose a motion to vary the agenda so that item 5, funding for the North Highcombe Relief Road, can be the next item the committee considers.
It should be going straight to the speakers. Wait, if you click on that, maybe there's some setting.
Right, there is somebody who is online who needs to understand that their microphone was live. I therefore move the following. 1, item 3, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 9th of July, be deferred to the end of the agenda. Is that seconded? Seconded by the Vice Chairman. We will now take a vote. All those in favour? That is clearly carried. Thank you. And secondly, I also move that item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers, be deferred to the next meeting, and ask that any emergent announcements be shared with members following today's meeting and published with the minutes of this meeting. Is that seconded? Seconded by the Vice Chairman. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is clearly carried. We may now move to item 5, funding for the North Highcombe Relief Road. Now, members, you have received the scrutiny report on this separately to the agenda. The report is pertinent to the North Highcombe Relief Road, a project of both regional and local strategic significance. Now, due to the incoming government's review of capital commitments, there is a possibility that this project may not proceed. We are therefore invited to examine the potential consequences of this risk. And the actions before us this morning are, firstly, to consider the economic and environmental impact should the North Highcombe Relief Road not go ahead, and 2, to ask the Chairman of the committee to collaborate with relevant executive councillors and with local members of Parliament in making the case for the government to confirm its grant for this scheme. And before we actually get into the meat of the item, I'd just like to set out how we're going to deal with this, as we do have a number of speakers, and one of them, I know, Dr. Johnson, has other parliamentary business, so she is time limited with us this morning. So the running order is going to be as follows. Firstly, Sam Edwards, who's the head of Highways Infrastructure and Laboratory Services, will introduce the report. And we also have present in the chamber Andy Gutherson, who's the Executive Director of Place. I'll then invite Dr. Caroline Johnson, who's the MP for Sleaford and North Hykeham, one of the two parliamentary constituencies that the proposed road runs through, to make her statement. And Caroline, you will have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Thirdly, I will invite Councillors Davis and Dyer, if they would like to make brief statements, and then we will open that up to members of the committee for questions. I'm sure you have a number. I certainly do. So if that's all clear, we will start with Sam Edwards to introduce the report. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and morning all. So I'll treat the paper as read, as we normally do for committee meetings. It's a fairly brief paper, but obviously there's been a level of correspondence going back and forth, and we're all aware nationally that there's a review of capital funding across the country, not namelessly in transport. What I will say is I have had communication with the Department for Transport, and they have confirmed to me that no news is neither good news nor bad news. It is just no news at this stage, but that doesn't mean there aren't concerns around the level of funding when these things are reviewed. The paper goes into some level of detail, fairly summarised, and I'm happy to expand on that. I'm not going to sort of patronise the committee in talking about what traffic disbenefits would be had by not building a road that mitigates traffic in a sort of negativity, but we are looking at things like reducing congestion, improving east-west connectivity that currently lacks, formalising what we probably know as the informal southern bypass that people use through villages, and then there's clearly the economic benefits. 4,500 houses across the southeast quadrant and the southwest quadrant, and 7 hectares of employment land would be lost without this scheme. They simply, as part of the Central Lincolnshire Local Plan, cannot be brought forward without elements of this project. So, as I say, it's probably better for me to summarise there and stop, and then I'll welcome any questions into more detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that introduction. We now move to Dr. Caroline Johnson, who, as I say, is with us via video link. Dr. Johnson is the MP for Sleaford and North Hykeham. Caroline, are you there and can you join us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Caroline. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the committee for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you all this morning. Since I was elected in 2016, it's been one of my top priorities to secure the funding and commitment from government level to build the North Hykeham Relief Road in my constituency. I push for it particularly because I know the amount of difference it will make to my constituents, but also to the wider population of the area. And I was delighted, therefore, when the previous government committed to providing £110 million for this project in 2019. The previous government recognised the North Hykeham Relief Road will be a vital asset for Lincolnshire and the wider region, recognised it will improve transportivity and unlock growth. My constituents, particularly in North Hykeham, experience awful traffic congestion, and the Relief Road is going to significantly alleviate this problem, and it will also, as you said, complete the ring road around the city of Lincoln. It is a well-known fact that reliable, efficient journey times for commuters into the city will encourage more workers and businesses to continue to frequent the city, invest in our area and drive economic growth, support the creation of new housing, deliver new employment opportunities, and it will link us to important gateways. As members of the committee will know, this project has been in the planning stage for quite a lot of time. The first preferred route consultation took back in 2005. And nearly 20 years on, the funding has been committed to, planning has been granted, and construction is literally ready to begin. Unfortunately, one of the first acts of this government since general election has to be in order to order a review of capital schemes. This means that the future of the North Hykeham Relief Road hangs in the balance. I therefore wrote to the Secretary of State of Transport on 29th of July to ask for her assurances that this project, which is in the late stages of development, will go ahead. Sadly, this assurance wasn't forthcoming. Not only was the Secretary of State unable to confirm the status of the scheme, but it was also not confirmed to me when the review itself will be completed. So we have an undetermined timeline as well. I know that Lincolnshire County Council, Mr. Chair, has undertaken a huge amount of work and spent taxpayers' money to get the project to the late stage in the process, including completing planning, consultation, acquisition and tendering processes. I'm very grateful for all the work the Council has done so far, and I'm worried that this work is now at risk because of the government's indefinite review. If this project does not go ahead, this government will have let down my constituents who desperately need this dual carriageway to be built, as well as it jeopardising economic growth for Lincoln and wider Lincolnshire.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Caroline Johnson there speaking from London. I'm going to move on now to Councillor Richard Davis, the Executive Councillor for Transport. Richard, would you like to make some comments, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, committee, and welcome. I appreciate wholeheartedly the sentiments expressed by Sam Edwards, but also from Dr. Johnson, and I thank her for bringing this to the attention of the wider community, and I think we have some press here today. It's imperative that this scheme goes ahead for all of the reasons you've heard. I'm not going to reiterate that. I'm going to make a slightly broader point that for too long, areas like Lincolnshire, and it isn't just Lincolnshire, but Middle England, as you might call it, rural England, has been ignored, forgotten, and a degree of disdain has been poured upon us by progressives in central government, in fairness of all hues at times. We saw this with the LEB and the cuts that were made when an incoming, I think it was Liberal Democrat minister, cut the funding for that scheme, and as a result we weren't able to build what we want. And I am very concerned that a similar play will take place over this scheme. The reality is that the East Midlands in particular as a region is the least well-funded area of the country for transport infrastructure. And we all know that if we want to build homes, if we want to build jobs and we want to grow, then we need that level of investment that the rest of the country gets. It cannot be right that just the southeast of England receives all of the benefits and all of the investment. So I really cannot stress how much I'm afraid of this being cut and how important it is that we support it. And I do hope that both Caroline, Dr. Johnson, and Hamish, as the Lincoln MP, can work with us to bang that message home to central government and the Department for Transport and ultimately the Treasury. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move to Councillor Tom Dyer, who is the Executive Support Member for Economy and Environment. Tom.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to the previous speakers. And it's good to hear from you, Caroline, and it's a shame that Mr. Faulkner wasn't able to be with us today. But as you're aware, I take a keen interest in the North Hycombe Relief Road. A significant portion of the road runs through my division, and whilst we're not here to speak about it, the reduction of traffic on local roads will greatly benefit the residents that I represent, and I'm grateful that committee are discussing this morning. And it's crucial, Mr. Chairman, that at this time it's being discussed here, because locally we all recognise the benefits of the bypass in terms of the reduction of traffic that it will bring on local roads, particularly in Waddington and Hycombe East. However, it's just as important to highlight the broader economic benefits of this scheme. So we've heard others mentioned, and it's in the report that Sam provided, that the project's benefit to cost ratio stands at 2.31. And that means in practical terms, Mr. Chairman, for every £1 spent, we will see £2.31 in return. And that's whether through reduced travel time, improved safety, or economic development. And I've been informed that this places the scheme within the high value for money category as defined by the Department for Transport themselves. And in addition, Mr. Chairman, the government has placed a significant political focus on delivering new housing. And in light of this, it would not only be short-sighted, but quite frankly delusional, in my opinion, for the government to cut or even scrape a bit of funding off of this North Hycombe Relief Road scheme. Once it's completed, the project would unlock land for 4,500 new homes and 7 hectares of employment land. And as a council, we have moved swiftly to ensure that we're ready to begin delivering this scheme next year. It will drive economic growth in the Greater Lincoln area, reduce congestion across Waddington, Hycombe, Lincoln, and it will importantly improve road safety for communities, especially ones that I represent. Now, Chairman, I'll conclude, you'll be pleased to know, just on final point, and it's if the funding is withdrawn, I can already anticipate the government's argument. We don't want to cut this, but due to our inheritance, we have no choice. But Mr. Chairman, politics, it's about choices. This £110 million, of which just short of 15 million has already been spent, that leaves us with £95 million capital investment that will transform our area. And to put it into perspective, the NHS spends £95 million in approximately 4.5 hours. Why am I making this comparison? Because, Mr. Chairman, ultimately, politics is about choices, and this investment is a choice we cannot afford to ignore. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. That concludes the statements to members. We will now move to questions. I'm actually going to kick this off, but if any member present in the chamber has a question which is particularly for Dr. Johnson, we have her for about another quarter of an hour, so we'll take any question for her first, then we'll open it up more widely. But I'm going to kick it off really with a question to Sam Edwards. Sam, this project has been underway for quite some years now in the planning. It's enormously complex and a great deal of work has gone into it. Could you just give the committee a brief scene setting of where we currently stand in the process, please?
Yeah, so when the outline business case was successful and we secured the 110 million, the clear thing for any level of capital infrastructure is time. The faster you deliver, the cheaper it will be, the sooner you'll get the benefits. So we've driven the programme really, really hard on this. So one of the things we did early on was go with a very different procurement strategy. Instead of going away and designing it with one and then procuring a constructor there, and then in between they got planning and land. We went very early on and procured a contractor as a design and build contractor. So the one single entity does your design, your surveys, your planning, your legal orders, and then eventually your construction. So effectively, we are already in contract. We've done that milestone several years ago. Now, during the process, we've done huge amounts of engagement and huge amounts of site investigation, probably more than any other scheme that we've done in the county that I'm aware of over the last 20 years. So we're very, very confident in what we have found. And you'll have seen probably driving by the significance of the trenches and the surveys that have been done in every single field of over 104 different interested parties with GAR's land. Not easy to pull together, but that is all in our collation now. That fed into the planning application, which was granted in May, and may I add to that of a scheme of this scale, there was relatively few concerns and that weren't addressed through the planning process. It was a real positive for the scheme, and really clearly shows that this is a scheme that is needed and not fundamentally objected to on principle. Since then, we've come back to the executive for approval to submit the legal orders. The legal orders are made up of the compulsory purchase orders and the sideways orders. Those orders are required to procure the land. So they are all prepared, they are ready, they're about ready to be published. They need to be signed, sealed, and then published. The thing that's been delaying slightly is agreeing the Section 6 agreement. The Section 6 agreement is what you sign with National Highways. For those that don't know, the Pennells roundabout at the western end is actually not the Lincolnshire County Council Highway Authority, it's National Highways area. So you have to get a legal agreement signed by them about not only the design that you do, but also how you will carry out your methodology on site and the legal wayleaves and accesses. Again, not a simple process. That has now been agreed. So that means we can publish the orders. Now, those published orders go through a statutory consultation process. Should there be an objection to those, it will trigger public inquiry. I'll say now with confidence, I would be surprised if there wasn't a public inquiry with the number of interested parties, and it only takes one objection for the planning inspector to cause that. So we are programmed in for that in probably spring, summer next year. Subject to approval and it going well, we would then have that decision at sort of autumn next year, which will give us the land effectively. So we can issue the notice to treat and notice to entry to start next April. Now, during that time, we also have the final business case, which we're just ramping up now. So that's the final business case that goes to the Department for Transport that confirms effectively a more detailed business case. Now you have a design, which, by the way, will be complete by November this year, the actual detailed design. Should the final business case be approved, that's the point that completely confirms the 110 million. So we can draw the money down, which we are, but you don't confirm the rest of it until the final business case is approved, and you can't submit the final business case until you have the land. So it's a sort of a connected tail you need to go through. So we are, effectively all of that, we are working towards breaking ground in little over a year, towards the end of next year. And that's doing some advanced works around the archaeological mitigation. There's a large Exolum oil pipeline that needs diverting. There's some ecological works which we'll do towards the end of next year, so hedges and things like that are out of the way when we start in sort of March, April 26 with the earthwork season. So we're on that programme, we're still there, we've been there, we've stayed on that programme for 2+ years. We've had positive feedback from the Department for Transport. The critical to this is where a lot of infrastructure schemes across the country are delaying, or what the DfT extending what they call the dragon's tail, the funding tail that goes back. We've stayed on that. We've stayed on the funding platform, and we expect to stay on that progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask one quick supplementary before turning to colleagues in the chamber. How much money have we spent so far, all up?
So since the outline business case was approved, we spent about 14.3 million to date. To be fair, I draw that number down about 4 weeks, so it will be high, but we're around that sort of 14 plus. What is worth noting, though, is there were costs prior to the outline business case that aren't covered in there. So, for example, the cost of actually pulling the business case together. There's the traffic model that was created to inform the business case, and then the traffic model that we did last financial year to inform the final business case. That will be outside of those costs. You've then actually got the sunk costs. So what's called sunk costs is the properties that we purchased 15 years ago when the route was agreed. The purchases of those 7 or 8 properties on Station Road. I'll be honest, I haven't gone through all of those numbers, but I would say on the totality over the life of this, we're probably nearing 20 million.
Thank you very much for that, £20 million. Right, before we move on, does any member in the chamber have a question which is particularly for Dr. Johnson? I'm aware that she has other parliamentary business. I'm seeing no heads. Do we have further speakers? Vice Chairman.
Yeah, apologies, I've not formulated it into a written question. Just going on the 20 million we've spent so far and the approval of the final business cases when we could actually draw down all of the money from government, how much do we anticipate spending prior to that, assuming we don't hear anything negative about the scheme going forward? And if it were to be scrapped at the final stage, is there any way we could recoup any of our costs, or utilise any of the work we've done on any other scheme to relieve traffic issues around North Highcombe area? Does that make sense?
No, I understand. So I don't have the exact numbers of what we would continue to spend until the final business case is agreed, but I think we're probably looking in the region of a further £4 to £5 million before we get to the point where the FBC is approved. What is worth stating is you can't draw all of the costs of the scheme down from the DfT. You can draw down the costs that are needed to inform the final business case. And of course, as I said earlier, to inform the final business, you need the planning, you need land, and therefore you can draw down on the legal orders and the planning process because you need that to inform the final business case. What you can't draw down is if we decided to do advanced works like archaeology or Exolum or utilities, that would be a Lincolnshire County Council risk prior to the FBC being approved, that we would take a view of the cost-risk balance between it. What was the second part of the question? So that was about what would we spend the funding on otherwise?
Yeah, so it's the work that we've done so far and would continue to do. Could that information or work be utilised in any other way to mitigate traffic near North Highcombe if the scheme were not to go ahead due to government cutting funding?
Probably in a simple answer, not really. The problems that we've got in Highcombe currently with traffic and so forth, and this isn't just about traffic, it's economic growth, but they are intrinsically linked to each other. The problems we've got there, you take Newark Road, it can't be any wider without demolishing properties. Building wider footway there is not going to take away the amount of traffic from the housing there. What I'm more worried about is if the North Highcombe Relief Road isn't built, the allocation of the 4,500 creates a massive deficit in the Central Lincolnshire Local Plan 5-year land supply, which with pressures mounting about delivering houses is whether you get little sections of the North Highcombe Relief Road to unlock more housing. Currently, you have more housing, more traffic congestion without the linkage being linked all the way through. So the problem gets worse than what it is now. That's where my fear goes, without the full infrastructure being in place and trying to deliver in sections. So to put it simply, I don't think there's very much that the county council can do to relieve or anywhere near the same level of what the North Icon Relief Road would do by doing cosmetic changes to junctions. Considering also the A46 Western Bypass is not the County Council's highway network, and it's over to National Highways, and we have no control to improve that, to mitigate it either. And just for this, I'll also throw in the fact that potentially the Newark bypass is also being developed, and that will attract significant greater traffic, which is fantastic for the economy of the county. Of course, you need the infrastructure to deal with that, which is what this scheme does, giving people options as they approach Pennell's roundabout to go round to the coast or go up to the free ports and so forth.
Thank you very much for that. We now go to Councillor Fleetwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Sam's just clipped some of the things I was going to say, actually. I fully support all of the previous speakers and the comments made, and fully support the argument that's been presented for the new bypass as it needs to go ahead. What concerns me is I've been a regular commuter to Nottingham over the last couple of years, and when I come back up the A46 and suddenly get to the Pennell's roundabout, frequently the western bypass is either stationary or blocked due to accidents. Well, we all know how much the cost of an accident is, and if you have a death on the road, it amounts to millions of pounds. So, you know, there is an absolute definite need to look at to try and support the bypass going to the southern end. Of course, I've had to use the unofficial bypass going through the bottom of Waddington and through. And yes, my family over the many years have lived in that area. I know it very well. But it's a very tortuous journey to try and get through. And you can just see all the people queuing at the traffic lights with cars, but queuing pedestrians trying to get across the road because you've effectively got a gridlock scenario. Everything doesn't move. When the western bypass doesn't move, nothing moves at that end of town. So it's an absolute tragedy in all respects. Sam's just touched on the fact that the western bypass is not under our control. Okay, it's not under our control, but we do need to try and pressure with regard to trying to get further improvements to that area, in addition to the southern bypass. And indeed, the area I represent, Cherry Willingham area, it's as far around, I think, going around the western bypass to the Bentley Hotel as it would be around the new section to go to the Bentley Hotel down the new section. So if that was the case, it would give opportunity for the people on the eastern side of town to commute around Lincoln a whole lot more efficiently. So it's not just the people, the economic development of the North Kesterton area. You need to consider the link through to Caister and beyond, to going out to the Skegness, because all of that traffic would have the opportunity to use that road.
Thank you for those comments. I think you make a particularly important point about accessibility for work, because it's all very well having employment land and new businesses, and we do very well with this council and our partners at the district level in encouraging business growth. But a lot of that is on the west and southwest side of Lincoln, and to have access to those jobs is incredibly important for economic prosperity. Can I pick up with you, Sam, on something which Councillor Fleetwood mentioned, the unofficial bypass? This road is called the North Hykeham Relief Road, and it does what it says on the tin, but actually the relief goes way beyond Hykeham. You can look inwards to places like Bracebridge Heath, Councillor Dyer's division involving Waddington, and indeed my division running out along the Lincoln Cliff, particularly villages like Harmston and Colby, which really suffer very much from heavy goods vehicle using the roads down the cliff running east-west as an informal bypass. And I know that they have really, really been looking forward to the arrival of the relief road, literally counting down to when it will be constructed. Can you give us an idea, have we quantified the kind of impacts that the relief road is projected to have on other communities beyond Hykeham? And could you give us an idea of that, please?
Sure, no problem. Just before I start, I'll just give some context to the percentages I'll run through now. So those in the summer holidays, we feel like there's half the amount of traffic there is normally. There's actually about on average, about 12% reduction in numbers of cars and traffic on the network during the summer holidays, but it feels like 50-60% as much traffic, and it's free. The boring reason for that in the highway world is junctions work on...
Sorry, Sam, I'm just going to interrupt you very briefly because Dr. Johnson now has to leave us, and I just wanted to say thank you very much to her for joining, and we will be in touch, and hopefully together with Mr. Falconer we can continue to put the argument for the road. But thank you very much indeed, Dr. Johnson, for joining us this morning. Sorry, Sam, back to you.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, so the junctions work on what's called a practical reserve capacity, so it's a percentage. Generally, junctions work brilliantly up to 85%. Once you get to 85 to 100%, they start to struggle. Anything over 100, they start to really suffer. So when we're talking about, a 12% reduction in the summer holidays, it's taken most junctions from, say, 85, 90% under the 85, and that's why it feels like it runs so freely. So I just thought I'd start with that for context before I come on to some numbers. So as we're saying, what's the informal southern bypass that we'll know, as I do, as someone who lives local to the area, going through Haddington, Auburn, Harmston, that kind of area. On opening year of this, we're looking at a 50 to 100% reduction in traffic along those roads, simply because the vast majority of people don't want to be on those roads. They want to get to the Pennells Roundabout, they want to get to the A46 and get elsewhere. But currently, they're stuck either on Meadow Lane, going through Highcombe, or coming down Brant Road, or cross Cliff Hill and coming down Newark Road. They don't actually want to be there, certainly the large HGVs. There's a significant reduction. Now, actually more impactful than that is Newark Road. And I'm not saying Newark Road, for example, in Highcombe. It's Newark Road all the way from Pennells through to South Park Avenue Junction, where the tidal flow is. The whole section of that is looking at a 10 to 20% reduction in traffic on opening year. That's massive in traffic terms. And to give you some context to that, opening year of the Eastern Bypass saw about a 20% reduction on Broadgate, which pretty much took traffic away immediately. That's what you're very likely to see on Newark Road on opening year. And then you're going a bit further, looking at Waddington, so Station Road, and I look at Station Road and Meadow Lane, the other informal bypass going through there. You're looking at a sort of 20 to 40% reduction in traffic, because once again, people don't want to use those. It's just that there's no reasonable alternative to do that. There's a huge amount of RAF traffic that comes from the base that actually live in Highcombe. They all will, from the consultation we've had, they don't want to be there either. They want to be on the relief road going through to there. And then another, I couldn't pick out every road, but the other one I looked at was Cross Cliff Hill as well, going over towards the southeast quadrant around that area, looking at a 10 to 25% reduction. Now, there are other reductions across the network. It is fair to say there are also some increases as a result of that. The significant is on the Lincoln Eastern Bypass, and that's a good thing. That's exactly what we want. We want traffic on the bypass. We don't want traffic on the roads coming into Lincoln. We want traffic on the bypass. That's where it should be. So people have got options. But the Eastern Bypass, granted, as we said, it isn't dual carriageway, but it's a single future-proof, and it has been designed to take the immediate traffic from the delivery of this scheme. So the options that this unlocks by building it is massive, because it gives you the opportunity to look at a completely different Lincoln centre of what we do with sustainable traffic, active travel, things like bus corridor, green corridors, things like that we simply can't look at right now because the traffic takes up all the space. And this is exactly what is defined in the Lincoln Transport Strategy. I'll just finish on one bit. So going back to what the previous one was, the Lincoln Integrated Transport Strategy. The strategy of that was to deliver the pinch point scheme. So several years ago, we delivered the Newark Road, Brant Road scheme, and then the Cannock Road scheme, and then the Wolsey Way, Rugby Road scheme up there. In themselves, they provided some positives, but they didn't come together until the Eastern Bypass was built. And that's where we saw the benefits. We're looking at exactly the same thing. Is the strategy, and this is the cornerstone of it, is building the relief road. Then all the really interesting things that we can do for a growing city that Lincoln is, with the economic growth and the aspirations that it have, gives us the platform to make those slightly alternative choices.
Thank you for that. Vice Chairman.
Yeah, so Obviously, one potential impact of new government is they might defer the project, and we all know that we've had massive inflation over the last few years. So could you tell us what assumptions have been made when modelling the costs and trying to work out the associated costs for delivering the scheme, and what the impact of deferring it or delaying it by a few years might be? Would the scheme still be deliverable? Would it be outside of our budgets? Would we need increased grants, etc., etc.?
So if we weren't to deliver the scheme, it's probably worth stating on the cost estimating bit about the competence there. We haven't got this ethereal being in a tower that makes up a number. We've actually gone out to the market. So all the prices that we've been presenting in committee papers, that's from actual market out there. Subcontractors, contractors giving prices back to Balfour Beatty as our design and build. So for example, the earthworks, which is a huge portion of this, we got 6 prices back. And we took a range of that informs the range that we have in the committee report. You can't really get more accurate than what the industry is telling you. Now, clearly, there's a level of inflation that we apply to that. There's certainly uncertainty about what inflation is, but that comes into the range that we provided that gives the sort of, I think it's the 208 is the high going down, with our most likely at 193. So yes, there's a level of uncertainty, but I don't think we can be more confident in what the industry is telling us as far as cost estimating. What the cost for the scheme will be if it doesn't go ahead, simply put, this scheme will never be as cheap as what it is right now. There's no way of getting around that. The inflation of this scale, particularly in construction inflation, doesn't go down. And I don't envisage this going down over the long time. So the longer that the scheme goes on, the more it will cost. Hence, going back to my starting comment, which is drive the programme, that will keep the cost down as much as you possibly can. Now, as far as the benefit to cost ratio, generally construction inflation unfortunately runs at a slightly higher inflation than background national inflation. So when you're looking at your benefit to cost ratio of 2.31, you could argue that the normal inflation will run at the sort that reflects the economic. Okay, if things cost more, the economic is worth more, and they balance. But because you're looking at construction inflation that runs higher than economic inflation, every year that goes past, your BCR is your benefit cost ratio is dropping because the cost of the scheme is greater than the economic benefits. So basically, for the taxpayer, right now, they will get the most for their money as far as economic benefits and traffic benefits on the back of this scheme. Now, just to add to that, there's also biodiversity net gain, which has come into this. This is having a significant impact. Positive and negative. Negative for cost, positive for the environment, absolutely. On schemes across the country, it is culling BCRs on infrastructure like this across the country. Ours is generally still pretty good and not being affected because mostly it's got low levels of diversity because it's farmland. But there is a heavy suggestion it will develop further into environmental net gain, which will start to hit schemes like this, which will erode that benefit to cost ratio further. So again, I just have to say that every evidence, everything I'm hearing, this scheme will never be cheaper than it is now, and it will never offer the level of economic benefits that it does as much as what it is right now.
Yeah, so it's a fair summation to say that if it were to be deferred for, it's been going on now for 20 years, so if it had been deferred for 5-10 years, it's potentially fair to say that we won't ever get funding for it because the cost-benefit analysis may have been eroded, the cost-benefit might have been eroded rather, so we really do need to push for government funding. And, slight detour, I think we all know schemes across Lincolnshire that need pursuing, and as Councillor Davis said, East Midlands is the poorest funded in terms of highways. I think if we lose a project of this magnitude where we're as far ahead as we are, then it'll be really difficult to get the energy going again to try and push forward for other schemes. So I think it's incumbent on us all to support this how we can.
Thank you very much. Now move to Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. You partly asked some of my question earlier on. What I'd like to know is if the government suspends or postpones this scheme, do we as a council are able to mitigate some of the HGVs using the route that they're currently going through the villages and up to Harmston? Thank you.
It's something that's been a bone of contention for many years, the HGVs using what we've called the southern element. it's a really difficult balance, because to ban that will put all that traffic on the roads that can't take it. They simply can't take Crosscliff Hill, Brant Road, Waddington Hill, Meadow Lane. They will have to go down those routes which also can't take that level of traffic. So you are balancing the impact of those communities through there with severing the east-west connection through Lincoln effectively, or the outskirts of Lincoln. I don't think we can commit at this stage either way. What I'd say is this scheme answers that. This is what the scheme does. It takes that away and removes that difficult balance. It delivers on both fronts.
Thank you for that. Can I... we have another one from Councillor Fleetwood. We'll come to you first, Councillor.
Yes, I'm going to go back to the Lincoln Eastern Bypass, and whilst it's very much a good project and it's working very well, at certain times of day you just need to listen to the radio and they talk about gridlock, and certainly between Rugby Road, Netlham Road and going further round, frequently through the day the entire Eastern Bypass is stationary. The reason being the traffic cannot get to where it needs to go. With the Southern Bypass in place, it would give the opportunity to move that traffic along. And of course, what we haven't considered, and nobody's mentioned so far, is the carbon footprint of all of those vehicles standing there, HGVs, with their pollutants going out into the atmosphere. So if we are being a democratically wise council moving forwards, and moving forwards according to what our plan has said, and we're trying to remove carbon footprints, this really does put a lot more emphasis on why we need to make the entire bypass work and why we do need this southern element.
Thank you very much. Can I just take you back, Sam, to the issue of housing, because we talked about 4,000 houses and we also talked about 7 hectares of employment land. I just wanted to probe that a little bit further. This all falls within the central Lincolnshire local plan area. Interest declared, I was North Stevens representative and am one of North Stevens representatives to the managing committee of that. And one of the things that that plan takes very seriously is making sure that infrastructure matches the development of housing. So you've talked about 4,000 houses. Could you give us an idea of where those are located? And are there any houses which are already in existence or coming into existence? I'm particularly thinking of the Southeast Quadrant SUE, which is 3,500 units in the current plan period and a total of 6. Do those assume that the Hike and Relief Road will be built? In other words, are we already building houses that would not have infrastructure to match them? And what would be the negative impact on future plans? Because I don't quite see how we could then build those houses that are planned, for example, in the southwest quadrant, if there isn't the transport infrastructure to service them.
Okay, yes, no problem. So I'll first by clarifying, so the 4,500 of housing is split across the southeast quadrant and the southwest quadrant SUs. So the southwest quadrant, none of that will be unlocked without this scheme. So the fundamental, the 2,000 houses and the 5 hectares of employment land will not come ahead as per the current Central Lincolnshire local plan. The Lincoln Eastern Bypass unlocked a level of housing, as you outlined, Chairman, and a level of employment land by building the Lincoln Eastern Bypass, but not all of the potential of the southeast quadrant. The further 2,500 houses of the southeast quadrant will be unlocked by also building the North Icon Relief Road, and it will also unlock a further 2 hectares of employment land. As far as the sort of coming into existence, I suppose, there's a level of housing that's already unlocked. There's ongoing discussions, pre-planning advice and applications and things like that regarding the southeast quadrant, which is really healthy. So it's coming through. There's a lot of interest. Without this scheme, that traffic is going to grow, and the total of the southeast quadrant housing will effectively make Bracebridge Heath have as much housing as around about Gainsborough. It's that big, the amount of housing that's coming. Now, you consider that a significant amount of that housing is already unlocked, and the traffic of what it is through Bracebridge Heath now, that is coming. There's no way about it. That's coming our way. And with this, and my fear is that because the pressure that North Kesteven will have, because this is both in their district area in the 5-year span, and quite frankly that the County Council will have in the local plan as a delivery partner of that local plan, is that we will be pressured to deliver housing. And where you've already got the South East quadrant with a level of infrastructure and so forth, that 2,500 could end up 2,000. A little bit more adds into it, because the pressures that we have as a council to deliver housing for the taxpayer. And that will grow the problem. And without this road, that problem will get to an insurmountable stage.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair.
Before you do, I think Councillor Davis wanted to just make a point.
If you forgive me, Neil, just to come back on that point. To take a very nice, pleasant technical answer and make it perhaps a little bit more political, the risk, I think, that we're talking about here, Mr. Chairman, and conscious that you're a professional in this area, is if the Central Lincolnshire Plan's cornerstone of the North Highcombe Relief Road isn't there, we're going to be open up to guerrilla planning applications. And we've seen this elsewhere in the county, where unscrupulous planners don't want these bits of infrastructure to come along because it has a plan that they then can't railroad through. And I think there's a very real risk that local planning authorities will be unable, in the event of this happening and the road not being built or postponed, which I thought was a very valid point, that unscrupulous house builders will railroad through planning authorities to build houses in places that aren't acceptable without community consent, because the local planning authorities, with a current push, and I think North Kesteven's looking at 1,000 houses a year they must build, won't be able to say no, and we will see blight of inappropriate housing across the county and the central area in particular. And what that really means is that houses will be built without the infrastructure, and then we'll have people affected by poor planning, and people will be moving into houses that don't have the requisite planning. You know, for once we have a plan, don't we? It's not on the back of a cigarette packet. It's a good plan. It stacks up. Everybody agrees. And we're in this frustrating situation where we can't afford to do it properly once the first time, but we seem content to do it badly numerous times down the road because we're not prepared to put our money where our mouth is, and that's very frustrating. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, don't get me started on planning, but you can build good lives in with good plans, and you can build poorer lives in. And we saw an awful lot of development, for example, back in the 1960s, and we are still living with soulless estates that are in the wrong place, that don't have the right kind of access either to employment or to schools, to doctors' surgeries. They don't have the hard and the soft infrastructure that actually makes an estate into a proper community. And that is what having an integrated plan is all about. Councillor Murray, I'm sorry, we went off on one slightly. Over to you.
No problem. I went on the tour with the Planning and Regulation Committee with yourself, Councillor Fleetwood and others, and I'm so sad because I was really happy looking at the line of the Highcombe Relief Road, and I'm sad that there is this delay, but I don't think it will be fatal, because the new government's policy is growth, growth and more growth. So it would be counterintuitive not to go ahead with this, because as we've heard from other councillors and officers, everything about this is positive, and it'd be a great thing for Lincoln and Lincolnshire. So I'm actually optimistic. I spoke to Hamish Faulkner about it yesterday, and he explained what I knew already, which is every time you get a new government, they look at what the previous government were planning, and there's been a lot of publicity about black holes and things, but I'm hoping that Hamish will be successful in lobbying on our behalf, that's for Lincolnshire, to make sure that this actually happens for all the right reasons. I can't think of a reason why we shouldn't do it, and I can't think of a reason why the government shouldn't support us, and that's obviously the County Council Labour Group position, and also the Lincoln City Council position.
That's very helpful, Councillor Murray, thank you. I'm looking around to see, are there any further final comments from the floor? One more briefly from Councillor Fleetwood.
I like that briefly. Yes, it's been alluded to with regard to the Central Lincolnshire Plan. It must be recognised that that plan has been recognised nationally as being a quality plan, It's at a very late stage for delivery, and Councillor Murray's just commented with regard to growth. Of course, the new government are talking in terms of a large amount of growth that will come to Lincolnshire. So we're not talking about what we currently have on the table and the X thousands of houses that are potentially in jeopardy if the bypass doesn't go ahead. It's also the additional element that might be there too. So just be prepared that there is a lot more there than what we are counting at the moment. The numbers will go up.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm not seeing any further speakers from the floor. All the points which have been made have been recorded by our officers and will be collected and passed on. I think I'm not going to pull this thing together point by point, but I think it is clear that on all sides of the chamber, and we sit in scrutiny in a non-political capacity, we acknowledge that this project simply makes objective sense. And as Councillor Dyer said, there are always choices at local government level, at national government level, at parish level. There are always choices to be made. But objectively, there are so many reasons stacking up in favour of this scheme. It will not, as Sam has told us, ever get cheaper. It will only get more expensive and more unaffordable. And we can all look around Lincolnshire or indeed the wider country and look at projects. Why didn't they build that road with dual carriage, or why didn't they build it at all? Things that we wish we'd done in the past. Well, now it's our turn. There was a report, and the government is very fond of quoting the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, to justify their look at capital spending and other expenditure. In fact, the OBR in the last week or two published a document called Public Investment and Potential Output. And it's quite geeky, but it is worth a read. And the bottom line is that public investment, on average, yields, as we've heard for this scheme, around 2.5 times the value related to the cost. £2.5 back for every pound that you put in plain English. And that's a gift that keeps on giving over 40, 50, 60 years. And this scheme seems to tick every box from the Treasury right on down. And I very much hope that we can all work in this chamber and with other bodies and with the two constituency MPs, Dr. Johnson and Mr. Falconer, to help persuade the ministry that this scheme should go ahead. And we're sorry that Mr. Falconer couldn't join us this morning, but we very much look forward to working with him in the future. So, I have a proposal to suggest. Firstly, I move that the committee endorse the report and acknowledge the impact of the North Highcombe Relief Road project not going ahead due to financial constraints, as well as the risk to the environment and local communities. And secondly, that the committee asks that myself as chairman of the committee and the relevant executive councillors collaborate with our local members of parliament in making the case to government to confirm its grant support for the scheme. Does anyone dissent from that? I'm seeing no dissent whatsoever. In that case, that matter is agreed. And thanks to everybody, both remotely and in the chamber, for the work that they put into this item this morning. Right, we shall move on and take another couple of items, and then we'll probably take a break. So we move to item 6 on the agenda, proposed reforms to the National Planning Policy Framework and other changes to the planning system. This report can be found on pages 19 to 36 of the agenda pack. The National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF in our jargon, outlines the government's planning policies for England and their application. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government is seeking feedback on potential revisions to national planning policy to align with the government's broader objectives. The report outlines the proposed changes to the NPPF and how Lincolnshire County Council as an organisation intend to respond to the consultation. And our actions are to consider and comment on the content of the report and the questions contained within. The report will be presented by Lana Meddings, Transport and Growth. I beg your pardon, I've got a late edition. I think it's actually going to be presented by Vanessa. It's going to still be presented by Lana Meddings. It's so excited by roads, I can't get on to the next item. But Vanessa Strange Head of Infrastructure Investment is also here to take any questions. Lana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think you've covered much of what I was going to say anyway. But just to reiterate, really, the consultation sets out specific changes to the MPPF, which they see as vital to deliver the government's commitments to achieving economic growth and aspirations to build 1.5 million new homes. So the consultation itself asks 106 questions, which I don't propose to cover in full today. However, the strategic planning team are pulling together Lincolnshire County Council's formal response. Officers have set out some topics of interest within the paper, such as housing numbers, the role the County Council will have in strategic planning, and the approach that we'll take to transport planning going forward. So yeah, we're asking members for their views, their comments, so that they can inform our whole council response on this national consultation document.
Thank you very much indeed. So, members of the committee, any comments? Do we have any comments on the floor? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the officers for their presentation of this report. I'd like to offer some feedback, particularly on one section of this report. Of course, similar to the previous discussion, welcome economic growth, but this needs to be appropriate for Lincolnshire, appropriate for our county, and not at any price. Quality of life for our residents must be taken into account. If I turn to 1.7 in this report, green energy and environment, and also the end of page 26 regarding the proposal to remove the availability of agricultural land used for food production, which should be considered alongside other policies in this framework. Do you agree with removal of this text from this footnote? I offer some feedback. I don't agree with that on this occasion, because we must remember Lincolnshire's economy, agriculture, food security. Last year, this council and a panel I chaired made some effort to make some recommendations regarding supporting agriculture. The recent county news covers Keep Lincolnshire Growing, highlights Lincolnshire. 30% of vegetables are grown in this county, and we can only keep Lincolnshire growing if we do protect our best farmland. Of course, we need to look at housing development in the correct areas. There are some concerns about what is happening regarding this. We do need to fight to secure Lincolnshire's best and most versatile agricultural land, because we know there are concerns at the moment. We have solar, pylons, and maybe now offshore turbines. So we are not a dumping ground in Lincolnshire. We must stand up for what we believe in. Of course, appropriate development without losing Lincolnshire's unique landscape. They are my comments at this stage, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lana, would you like to come back on any of that, or Vanessa?
I think I'll just say all comments that are made today will obviously inform our response that we will put forward as to central government, and those points are all noted and already align with the draft response that we've started to put together and comments from other officers, so thank you for those.
Next, the Vice Chairman.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with the points raised by Councillor Taylor, and I read somewhere, and I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, that less than 1% of farming land's been developed. But obviously the problem we have is if you do that all in one area, then even if it's 1% nationally, it might be 10% locally, and I realise 10% is probably not going to happen. But my concern is that it's great that we build houses. We have a 1 million house shortage across the UK, so I appreciate houses need to be built, but as Councillor Taylor said, it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be in good areas. And realistically, most areas of Lincolnshire need to have better infrastructure in order to facilitate those. So my concern is are there any concerns about the capacity of, firstly, the local authorities to process the applications and make sure that all the processes are followed correctly? And secondly, are there any specific strategies that will be implemented to allocate these houses outside of, because obviously councils have a 5-year land supply, which took into account the last allocation of houses, what will be the impact of changing that, do we think?
So I think taking your first point in terms of the resources on local authorities, this is something that is being looked at centrally by the government. So one of the areas that they are looking at in terms of resourcing, so additional resources for local authorities, should more onus be put on local authorities in terms of additional pressures for applications to be determined or additional applications. So I know that is being looked at centrally. I think until we know the implications of the changes on the MPPF, we can't be certain what those implications will be on us as delivering that service at LCC at this time. And then on housing, I mean, we touched on it on the previous agenda item, didn't we, in terms of those what those pressures are going to be, and it sets out within the paper those using the new guidance for allocating housing numbers, what those pressures will be on central Lincolnshire and on Lincolnshire as a whole, on our district authorities in terms of that delivery. So it's going to be a big challenge.
Yeah, can you give us any further information on what additional resources are? I mean, I know the government likes the phrase additional resources, but I'm sure the colleague on my left will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure last time I was paying attention to number of planning officers, for instance. There was a national shortage of qualified planning officers. So it's always saying additional resources, but yeah, is that just a question mark on a bit of paper somewhere, or is that actually tangible additional resources that potentially could be utilised?
Let's hope so. Let's hope it's actually tangible resources, but I know that certainly as an authority and speaking to other authorities across the county, we're working with providers, so working with our universities in terms of making sure that we have got the provision of courses locally and within the East Midlands, that we are training planners so that there are planners available should we get that extra resource from central government to employ additional staff within our authorities.
Yes, before moving to the next speaker from the floor, I think I'm right. I need to declare an interest here because I am a planner in public service. And I noted the government had promised an extra 350 planners. There are 450 local planning authorities in England and Wales, and it works out at I think about 1/7 of a planner per local planning authority. So I don't know whether you get an arm, a leg, a bit of a finger. It's very, very challenging, and you can say, right, we're going to make an allowance to train some more planners, but the kind of development the government is talking about is going to involve large schemes. Large schemes require planners who might have spent 10 years training to get to the point where they can handle that level of complexity. It is not something where you can just turn on a tap, and I think the Vice Chairman makes a good point. The capacity of the system can be increased, but it will take time to increase it. And my concern is we must never forget quality as well as quantity. And that isn't just in terms of the developments that get built, but also in terms of the planning judgments that go into making local plans. And pretty well every local plan is now going to have to be revised. And I think we're going to hear more from the government at the time of the budget about how that might work out. But also in terms of doing of actually assessing planning applications. Councillor Fleetwood, you are next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to hear you're going to be working a little harder in the future. Yes, housing, I've already talked about it in the previous paper. Yes, central government are dictating that we will build more houses. Well, the big question is where and how it fits in with the local plan. But my real issue is NSIPs. And it's all very well saying we're going to be delivering wind turbines here, solar panels there, but the decision-making process is out of the hands of the NPPF, is out of the hands of making decisions at county or district levels. It's a national decision. And then when we hear such things as what's going to happen at Gainsborough, where I think is it 2,500 hectares of solar panels going in, 2,500 acres, it's one heck of a lot of land that we are being dictated to from central government that will be built, but no matter really what we say, they can not necessarily take into account the comments that we make with regard to any NTIP application. And it's almost to a stage where democracy is going out the window. In Lincolnshire, we've got more than just one NTIP application. We've got a dozen or more probably ongoing at the moment. And at that sort of stage, the question comes, well, we really do need to get government to listen to opinions, either from local individuals, from local councils, or people around us, so that we can support our local communities. And although 1.2 makes a little comment at the bottom with regard to NTIPs, I think it needs to be quite strong, the recognition that we make and go forwards with.
Thank you very much. Lana or Vanessa, do you want to come back on that?
Just to reiterate really that we are working with all officers across the local authority in terms of putting together this response. So we have got significant comments in terms of that NSIP regime and the impacts that would have on LCC.
Thank you very much. Next is Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome the ambition that the government's got to make wider changes to ensure that local planning authorities are able to prioritise the types of affordable homes their communities need. Now, there's a lot of young people today who can't buy a house and they're struggling to rent a house. And this is the government saying, we're going to change this. We're going to make it easier for councils to give planning permission, particularly for affordable homes. And that's a great thing, because when you talk to young people who are struggling, that's the kind of help they need. And also welcome very much the support for clean energy and the environment, including through support for onshore wind and renewables. I think Lincolnshire needs to do its part in helping to get to net zero, and onshore wind and renewables is the way forward.
Thank you very much for that. Can I pick up, it's partly picking up actually on something that Councillor Murray said, and that's the role of local government and the role of quality. And I appreciate that we're commenting as the county council. Obviously, a lot of these matters are actually handled via districts. But in your assessment of these changes taken as a whole, do you have any concerns that in a very proper concern about building more houses, quantity, we may be losing sight of quality? And secondly, how do you see any impacts on the role of local government in the planning system? And will it be more or less constrained by central government instructions?
Just a small question then. I think certainly in the consultation there is we've personally and talking to others welcomed the role that the county council could potentially have in strategic planning. So actually it may enable us to have more control actually moving forward. Certainly when we look at planning in the round and actually look at planning, looking at the infrastructure that's required to deliver the housing that's proposed, and actually looking at planning as a whole, so looking at the transport element, looking at the infrastructure element, and actually looking at the housing allocations. So that strategic element which could be introduced is welcomed. I think the difficulty comes in that if the plans and the housing figures are progressed at pace, then there is going to be a huge amount of pressure on district authorities and then also on us to deliver those quickly, and that is when we lose the quality because it's not planned for properly. It's not planned for in the round, and as alluded to in the previous item, this is when we then get developments that come forward which then district authorities have limited powers in refusing because the time constraints are such that we need to get the housing numbers through.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I absolutely endorse that, by the way. I think one of the most positive things about the changes the government are talking about is the potential integration of a broader range of issues than just spatial planning, than just land use planning. and particularly trying to incorporate economic planning. Theoretically and in practice, that is of course there, but you can still see the bones of, well, basically the Town and Country Planning Act of 1948 in everything we do, and we are a long way on from 1948, 80 years almost, but still it's very much land use planning and the land use concept, whereas a broader way of incorporating economic planning into a more holistic system could indeed have benefits. Again, I think there'll be more to come out in October and November than is just contained in the NPPF consultation. Do I have any more speakers from the floor? In that case, thank you very much indeed for an excellent report. These are very, very interesting times in terms of planning, and I hope that our contribution and those of all other planning authorities, be they county or be they district, will be listened to by government, because there is no shortage of good ideas and there is no shortage of willingness to change. Any system can be changed. The important thing is to make sure that those changes are improvements. So, thank you all for your contributions. The proposal before us is that I move the committee endorse the report, and I ask that our comments raised in the debate be shared with relevant officers who will be shaping the response to the ministry. Does anyone dissent from that? I am seeing no dissent. Thank you very much indeed. That is therefore agreed, and we move on to item 7. It's a planner's delight this morning, because that item is the Streets Design Code. The next report can be found on pages 37 to 40 of the agenda pack, and this report outlines proposed activities for creating a Streets Design Code. As statutory consultees in the planning process, Development Management, that is LCC Development Management, acting as the highway and lead local flood authority, plays a key role in ensuring that new developments are well integrated, safe, healthy and sustainable. And I can just say from a personal point of view, working in my professional life with that team, they do a smashing job. Lincolnshire County Council currently has 2 documents, the Design Approach and the Development Road Specification, which guide developers on highways, drainage, street design. Both documents require updating, and the aim is to merge them into a single user-friendly reference to enhance development quality, which goes back to exactly what I was talking about before. Encouraged by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, LCC plans to produce a Streets Design Code to establish clear parameters for street design and drainage in future developments. And the actions before the committee this morning are firstly to support the production of the Streets Design Code, and secondly agree any topics to review or include within the Streets Design Code. And the report will be presented by Becky Phillips-Mellish, Growth Manager, Planning Advice, Development Management, and I think Warren Peppard, Head of Development Management, is also with us today. Becky, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, for the introduction. Yeah, I mean, the anticipated outcomes of us undertaking this piece of work is to try and deliver developments in Lincolnshire that are incredibly high quality, that integrate with the existing communities around them. I know that's something that is often, it's a bit of a struggle in the planning system. We often end up with quite cookie-cutter national house builder products as opposed to something that actually reflects what local communities would expect to see. There's also an opportunity to reflect upcoming changes and things that have recently changed within the planning system, such as biodiversity, better drainage and flood risk, and also things that I know are particularly contentious on individual planning applications that come forward, so things like car parking, for example. Really what we want to do is encourage good development and prevent bad development, and I'm sure the committee agrees that we've got lots of examples of both probably across Lincolnshire, and we want to make sure that all development is pulled up from the bottom. The way that the Streets Design Code is likely to be sort of formatted is with musts, shoulds and coulds. So musts will be mandatory requirements that all developments will have to align with. Shoulds will be requirements that would require justification from developers if they want to deviate from those, and coulds are recommendations for what we would like to see in Lincolnshire. I just want to stress the purpose of this isn't to replace face-to-face engagement with developers. It's just an assistance tool, and it gives us that really clear framework that we can refer back to shape development proposals as we wish to see them. We anticipate it'll take 12 to 18 months to undertake this piece of work, and we'll be working with colleagues across the entirety of the county, because obviously we recognise the fact that this is a multidiscipline, cross-service document that's going to impact lots of different service areas, not just within the Place Directorate. As you'll see in the report as well, there'll be lots of engagement with councillors and with the community through parish councils. One thing I did want to touch on before we open up for questions and comments is we can use this to really strongly influence good design as Lincolnshire County Council. However, we are not the ultimate decision makers, and that responsibility still lies with the local planning authorities. And that there's many stakeholders that are involved in that design process as well. For it to hold any weight in planning terms, it will have to be adopted as a supplementary planning document by the various local planning authorities. And we hope that many, if not all of the LPAs will be happy to do so, but it's just worth recognising, you know, the expectations there. And with that, I'll open up for any questions or comments, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
If I can jump in.
The Vice Chairman will begin and will then move to the floor.
Thank you very much. At 1.3, yeah, it said considering local nuances and complexities. And then you quantified slightly more by saying it needs to be adopted by the district councils. I'm struggling to see how we can align with Lincolnshire generally, musts, shoulds and coulds that takes into account local nuances, especially when it comes, for instance, at 1.6 it highlights, where was it? It was waste, refuse storage and collection. Obviously that's done differently across the different areas of the county, so how would we reconcile those differences?
I think where we have known differences across the counties, we can actually direct those must, shoulds and coulds to the specific planning authority requirements. I think as well, where we're saying must, shoulds and coulds, that must could be quite vague to enable us to best suit that to the particular development type. So I think we actually do need to be quite careful in not making it so inflexible that it doesn't allow for those local changes across the various district boundaries, and also changes that might come over the next few years as well.
Yes, I think you make a very good point about local character being incredibly important in good design. It's interesting that the concept of design codes was something which was being built into the planning system by the last government. The new government has said that it believes in design codes, but it seems to be an emerging point of view that rather than having them on covering an entire local planning authority area, in our case districts or the city or indeed the borough, the new government see them as more focused on specific local large developments. There are good things about that and bad things. Good things we have, for example, in the Southeast Quadrant SUE, a design code which I was involved in making sure actually happened. And that is a very useful thing to have. I slightly worry about abandoning it across the district, but that localism element is clearly something which is very important in delivering good design. So I'm pleased to hear that response. Councillor Fleetwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Becky's done a great presentation here, and I fully support the concept of going ahead. Everything seems great, wonderful, and I'm looking forward to some outcomes. I note under, where are we, 2.2, 2.3, Bespoke Council Working Group is meeting on the 24th of September, which is great, and I'm part of that group. But then 2.3 then says the report will be considered at highways. This report will be considered at highways on the 16th. So I don't know, have we got the order the right way around or not? The report's going to highways, then it'll be considered by the working group, or is it the working group will produce something and then it will go to highways?
Yeah, there is a lot of interested parties in this, hence the need for the vast amount of consultation that we're doing. Ideally, I think timelines maybe would have been different, but I'm conscious that, you know, we really want to get this up and moving, and we don't want to be sort of held back by timelines. We will be coming back to this committee and Highways and Transport as the project progresses. So the presentation at Highways and Transport will be very similar to this. It's more just agreeing the kind of principle of the fact that we're going to move forward with this piece of work. Then when we have the Bespoke Council working groups, that will be to really get into the detail of the content. So we will obviously feed back through these committees as required as the project progresses.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Next, Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I do support the principle of this this code being introduced. My division has got numerous new housing developments in it and many more coming online at the minute, and they are the biggest cause of my issues in terms of you know, footpath issues, flooding. So I do welcome it because, like I said, they just are the biggest bringer of issues. My concern is, and it goes back to what the Vice Chairman was mentioned, is about the CUDs, as you described them, and about how strong we can be in that, because, you know, particularly in my area, we've got the two big urban expansions going on in Gainsborough. And whilst I understand that the developer might be very strong in why they think and want things to be done in a certain way, we've already seen on one of the urban extensions that the reality is that the local knowledge probably should have been listened to in the first place, and it should have been a should, not a could. So it's about how strong we can be in that situation to make developers and listen to the local knowledge and experience to get things right in the first place, so we're not 4 or 5 years down the line like we are now and having to try and resolve some of these issues. Thank you.
Yeah, completely recognise those points. I think the benefit of having an actual written design code is we have that really clear framework to hold developers to, whereas obviously at the moment we've got guidance documents which we will try to use to influence that good design, but this actually gives us a bit more teeth in those discussions. So hopefully it would not, I'm sure it will not ever entirely prevent poor development from going forward or things that could have been done better, but it should certainly, like I say, bring things up from the bottom there.
Thank you very much indeed. And next, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I do support the production of this street design code. Important for this to take place. My question is actually regarding more an operational matter regarding the future of maintenance, because we know quality street furniture can enhance an environment, can make an area look very attractive, particularly such a wide area that is, such as even economic development, and making an area more prosperous regarding house sales. However, the opposite can also happen when these are not maintained or they are installed and there's no maintenance and they slip between the cracks of who installed them, developer, the local council, or sometimes a private landlord. That's my concern. Clutter in a street can look messy and untidy, so it's to ask the question about future maintenance and how do we deal with that potential concern of that negative image when these are not maintained, unclean or damaged, and it can actually undo the good work which takes place after this policy is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. My personal view is that where something serves a public benefit within the highway, we should, where we can, try and adopt that to make sure that we can, in perpetuity, ensure that that is kept to a good standard. We have mechanisms such as charging commuted sums from developers that will cover that ongoing cost of maintenance, so that that's not coming out of the taxpayer purse. There will still be, I'm sure, circumstances where a private management company, for example, might take on ownership of certain, pieces of infrastructure. But for the most part, anything which is integral to that public realm fabric, we should be adopting as part of the highway, be that us as LCC, as Highway Authority, or the District Council, things like, I don't know, refuse bins and things I'm thinking of, that we wouldn't necessarily take on ourselves.
I'd just add to that a good practice, this is beyond the county council's function, but good practice at the local planning authority, the district level, when a significant development is approved, you should always have a clear schedule of who is responsible for what, because quite often you will have some private drives off public adopted highways. It's absolutely vital also to include the infrastructure that you don't see. You've mentioned the public realm above ground, but there's also very important drainage infrastructure underneath it. Everything needs to be absolutely clear up front. That's not our job, that's the job of the local planning authorities, but I think that the design guide, when it is finished and hopefully adopted by our districts across the county, should actually help planners in making sure that exactly the point you raised, Councillor Taylor, are dealt with when a planning consent is granted, and then that future maintenance is secured in perpetuity and everybody knows whose job it is, whose responsibility it is, who has to pay for it. Are there any further questions? The Vice Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much. It may be an obvious question, but I'm not an expert planner, and I admit I have lots of knowledge gaps in planning. In terms of the street design code, how easy is it to set the must, shoulds and coulds to be aspirational? Because I'm assuming it's much the same as when I tell my students you've got to do X amount of work, they'll do X amount of work and no more. If planners are coming in and doing the bare minimum that legally they have to, how do we get them to comply with this and make it in a position where we can enforce it rather than them just go, well, yeah, but you said could and we chose not to?
That is kind of the function of the must, shoulds and coulds. So the must will be, you absolutely cannot not deliver this. So it will stop the really poor development. So that is that bringing up from the bottom again. The shoulds is for those developers who want to deliver a better quality product. Here are your options for how you could do that. The coulds are to allow that innovation from developers who really want to create a really high quality development. I think it would be unrealistic to expect that every development that comes forward is going to hit those coulds, but it's about enabling that art of the possible, that inspirational, innovative options for the developers that want to bring that forward. But there will be some developers who will just deliver the must, which is why we need to make sure they're watertight of this is exactly what we expect from you in Lincolnshire, and we won't accept anything less.
Thank you, yes. Without beating the drum for my day job, should is unenforceable, but you already know that. So it's a question of how these things are framed, and perhaps they become more enforceable where they are phrased in a way that links them to local character. There are ways of doing these things, but the planner's dread is seeing the word should in a policy in a local plan, because it basically is an invitation not to follow it. But we will pursue that in the working group, to which I'm very much looking forward. I'm not seeing any further calls from the floor, so thank you very much indeed for all your questions, for all your comments, and for an excellent report. We now start a project which we look forward to staying with over the next 20 or so months. So the proposal before us is that I move the report be received and that the production of a streets design code be supported, and that the topic of the code to be reviewed includes those suggestions today by the committee. Any dissent from that? I am seeing none. In that case, that matter is agreed. We've now been going for an hour and a half, so I offer to the floor the option of a 10-minute comfort break. Would that be in line with what people want? Yes. In that case, at 26 minutes past 11, we will take a break now, and we will resume in 10 minutes' time. Thank you. Thank you very much. We now resume our meeting at 11:37 and we move to item 8 on the agenda, which is service level performance reporting against performance framework 2024 to 25, quarter 1, economy, flooding and waste. This quarterly performance report can be found on pages 41 to 54 of the agenda pack. The purpose of this paper is to provide the committee with a summary of the performance of the Council's economy, flooding and waste services, and the actions before us are: members are invited to consider and comment on the environment and economy service level performance for 2024-25 quarter 1. The report will be presented by Samantha Harrison, Head of Economic Development, and Chris Miller, Head of Environment, and Chris Yorston, Head of Waste, and we will take questions after the report briefing. So, Samantha, you've been very patient waiting this morning. Over to you.
Thank you. So I am here to update on 2 of the measures for economic development. The third measure, the adult skills, that doesn't come into play until quarter 2, and that's because of the academic year starting. So the 2 that I'm going to talk to you about, one is the number of businesses supported. You will see that we've exceeded our target for quarter 1, and that has predominantly been due to timing. So we've had a very good start in terms of supporting businesses through the Business Lincolnshire Growth Hub. There's been real demand for digital support through helping businesses understand artificial intelligence, understanding digital activities, particularly also businesses uptaking the Made Smarter industrial digitalisation programme. Furthermore, we've had a really strong inward investment programme. We have been exhibiting at a number of expos. We've had a real strong presence at the UK Real Estate and Investment Forum in Leeds, and we've held a number of key events, particularly looking at feeding the UK. There's been a number on energy, and we've had a number of industry trips. So that has really galvanised the investors. It's leading through to inquiry, so we're pleased with the direction of travel, particularly on this quarter. In terms of the second measure, the level of external funding attracted to Lincolnshire, we are behind target, and this is really a timing issue due to funding coming through. With a change of government, there has been delays in contracts being signed and funding coming through into the local authority. So rest assured, delivery is happening. It's just that the funding hasn't followed in the same manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move to... Yeah, we'll take all the questions at when we've heard all the reports, because they do interlink. So we move to Chris Miller, Head of Environment. Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just a brief report on the progress of the Section 19s. As you can see, we've changed a little bit the way that the target is now measured, and we're looking at the number of Section 19s investigations that are completed within 6 months of being started. As you see at the moment, the actual total is lower than target. That's because of the date and time in which we introduced the target coincides with the storms Babette and Henk reports, of which we have a considerable number by comparison to what our normal work would be. So that will catch up with itself as we progress through the quarters of this year. Just by example, and just to update from the figures that are on there, the majority of the reports prior to, all the reports prior to storms Babette and Henk are now completed. The ones that from within Storm Babette and Henk, the majority were complete by the end of August. We still have a number that will be completed by the end of September, which were the more complex ones, as we always explained. Those together will then start to inform our capital programme of works going forward, where we can start to develop flood alleviation schemes with the other risk management authorities and any works in our own right as part of a capital programme. And then that will just leave us with 22 investigations to undertake, which will be done by the team within LCC rather than being outsourced to contractors. We will deliver those in-house, and they're scheduled to be completed by the end of November. So pending there being no more rain, we should be pretty much at a position by the end of November where we're completely on top of these.
Thank you very much. And finally, Chris Yorston, Head of Waste.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, for the waste targets for quarter 1, so waste collected per household is 270 kilograms per household for quarter 1, and that's below the target of 280, which is good news, as prevention is the highest objective of the waste hierarchy. which means that less waste generated per household, which results in less haulage and processing. For quarter one, the recycling rate overall is 44.69. This is quite similar to the previous year's quarter one, which was 44.99. And we have a forecast for the full year. The estimate of that is 40.89. This is lower than our target of 50%. And although our recycling rate continues to remain around 41%, it's very similar to the national average, which is around 42%. However, we now have the capital funding secured for our food waste project, which we are progressing well with towards the April 2026 deadline, and we are expecting this to increase the recycling rates by around 7%. The recycling rate at the recycling centres is 74.1%, and this is slightly lower than the same quarter in last year. However, this could be attributed to, it is attributed to lower green waste tonnages presented in the first quarter, and this could be in relation to the sort of the cold, wet start that we had at the start of this summer. We are anticipating this to improve in quarter two, and we're forecasting the recycling rate at the recycling centres to be 75%. Lastly, the landfill target is very low. We have achieved just 0.15% of Lincolnshire's waste going to landfill. This is excellent news, as landfill is the lowest level on the waste hierarchy, and a significant majority of our waste is diverted from this level. We're continuing to work well with our energy from waste and other energy from waste suppliers to secure capacity for the planned outages that we have in the rest of this financial year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll kick questions off, and I'm going to start with you, Chris. Landfill, and it's something we've discussed offline. We have a target which is currently 5%. We are delivering phenomenal achievement to get down to 0.1%. I remember when we hit 1/3 of a percent and thought that was remarkable. So it's a tremendous achievement. What follows on from that, fairly logically, is that we need to review that target, because beating our target every time simply suggests the target isn't good enough. The committee may have views on what that is, or should be, but can you give us an indication of the kind of timescale that you have in mind, and that hopefully we will agree with for a review of that target?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think last year we performed really well on this target, and that was the first year that we really utilised additional capacities at other energy from waste, which was able to divert that waste from landfill really successfully. So that was a great news story, and we are continuing to do that at the minute. So we have some quite large outages planned for this financial year, particularly around February, where the plant at Highcombe needs some significant work doing to it, and the team are working very well at the minute to try and secure that capacity in advance. So my thoughts is that I think it would be good to have this for another year and review at the end of this year to whether we can achieve this this sort of performance successfully, because it does rely on us securing that capacity at third party energy from waste, and if there isn't that resource or space available, then ultimately we would have to divert to landfill. And just to put that into a bit of context, last year we diverted 16,000 tonnes from landfill to energy from wastes. If that went into landfill, that would have equated to 5.5%. So we would have not met the target last year. So it does rely on us being able to source that capacity.
Right, but should we not be taking into account when we set our target the fact that there will periodically be downtime at the energy from waste plant? And what implications would there be for some of the waste being diverted in the future from the current mixed waste into a stream specifically for food waste? Would that help or hinder in terms of target setting?
We will see a reduction going to the energy from waste facility, and so that would probably improve the scenario slightly, because we're going to be taking 30,000 tonnes out of that energy from waste stream. However, when the plant goes down, there will be a live residual stream going into it. I've looked at some of the sort of historic years figures from the last 2 or 3 years of what we were sending to landfill, and we were looking around the sort of the highest at 3.9% in 21-22, and sort of the lowest at 2.5% in 2020 and 2021. So yeah, it shows that when we've not been able to secure that capacity, that sort of figure of about 3 to 4% is what would be diverted to landfill.
I won't keep beating this particular horse to death, but I think it's one that will come back, and it would be interesting to have a further report on your evolving thoughts, because I think the committee is a little concerned that we should have targets which are always ambitious, but I won't carry on that one. Vice Chairman.
Yeah, just a couple of points. Firstly, it's great to see we're supporting as many businesses as we are. You could argue that it's not great to see that many businesses need supporting, but at least we're there to help them when they need it. A couple of questions. The funding received obviously fell well below target, and I appreciate that it says a contributing factor was the funds from the UK SPF fund. Once that comes in later in the year, will that then put us on target, or are we still a significant proportion under target? What's the expectations on that? Other questions are, whilst the recycling rate may be in line with other people, it does seem that it's still dropping despite the fact that we've rolled out the purple lidded bin. So is there anything more we can do to move the needle on the recycling rate, or are we just accepting that people are progressively getting worse and occasionally attacking it with new schemes and education? And the recycling rates at the household recycling centre, do we know, I know in previous quarters we've had it where if the specific bin's full, they've just diverted waste into the general bin. Is that a continuing issue? And if so, what can be done about that? Because I know in my patch specifically, there was a massive uproar from opening from 7 days to now being open 5 days to facilitate the moving of those bins. And I know there've been issues with transport, etc. But you know, is that contributing at all to the not hitting the target? Thank you.
Chairman, I don't know whether Samantha was going to pick the point up, but I'll just pick it up. When in the report, page 42, where it mentions the Economic Development Service have supported 1,020 businesses, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's often it's if businesses want to expand or scale up or have well, it's within with the report, so that's not a bad thing. In fact, I think that's very much a positive thing. That many businesses want the support. So sorry for coming in.
Samantha, do you want to add to that?
Thank you. Yes, no, we're pleased with the number that are coming in because it links into the number of investment inquiries. There's greater interest in Lincolnshire. There's more advanced engineering and food tech inquiries. We've got digital businesses that are seeking to grow. We've got more people now than ever on our scale-up programme. We've reached the 300 businesses going through the scale-up programme, which is we've never got to that stage before. So it's a really positive direction of travel. We're pleased with that. And we want to open up and make sure the Growth Hub is available to all businesses so that they're aware of the support available. In relation to, you asked the question about the funding gap. We do expect the contracts to come on board. I think the other thing to make the committee aware is that when we were forecasting the targets for the external funding, we were looking at some devolution transition funding coming into the play. And with the pause in the activity on devolution, we are waiting for that to come back on board. So we could have a challenge further on down the line, but at this moment in time, we are still positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any further questions from the floor? Councillor Bowles and then Councillor... I beg your pardon, I'm missing out an officer response. Chris Yorston.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to pick up on those two questions. So the for the H2RCs, the recycling rates, this year we've got a new contract in place for our H2RC haulage, which has been really successful, and we've seen much less disruption. So in the past, sometimes when a waste stream has been full, we've offered the customers would you like to put it in the non-recyclables and give them the option to do that. This year we've reduced that significantly, so we're having more waste streams open more of the time. There has been the odd disruption here and there, but it's vastly reduced, so the service has improved, so we're seeing a good benefit to that. With regards to the overall recycling rate plateauing at the minute, it's not localised to Lincolnshire, it's a national issue, and that's why there's quite a lot of things coming now from central government. So we've got simpler recycling with the introduction of food waste, so that is going to be a significant step change to improving our recycling rates. But also on the horizon after that is the inclusion of soft plastics within the recycling mix. We're estimating that to be a further sort of 15,000 tonnes that we might be able to divert from our non-recycling into our recycling to further boost our recycling rates. We're also starting to progress with our reuse, so this is something we're really looking to bring forward. We've got a reuse facility opening at Tattershall Recycling Centre next week, and that will be our first sort of trial into that area, and hopefully that will be successful and we can look to expand that. We're also looking at a community repaint trial as well at another HWRC in Grantham, where consumers can bring sort of half-used tins of paint and then they can swap them free of charge, and then that's another material that we're diverting from the waste stream. And also at a national level as well, there's the extended producer responsibility, which will be kicking in next year, where producers have to pay fees into this scheme, so that's incentivising them to use more recyclable packaging. So we're hoping to see in the next 2 or 3 years materials that would have gone in your sort of residual waste stream being diverted into the recycling stream, and then therefore improving recycling rates. Thank you.
Are there any other answers which I have interrupted before I move on? No. Sorry about that. In that case, Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the recycling rate again, Chris. Obviously, and I'm speaking here as a dual actor, the district councils obviously influence, or will have a big influence in that recycling rate as the collection authorities. We receive a similar report to this at West Lindsey, and whilst we're saying, you know, the Vice Chairman's questioning that recycling rate being at 40%, I was really alarmed that West Lindsey's individual recycling rate sits at 19%. So that, as one district, is obviously significantly impacting the percentage across the county that you're reporting. As yet, I've not got a response from West Lindsey about why that is the case in that area. So I'm going to put the same question to you. Do you know why that's the case in that area? And what are the county trying to do to work with West Lindsey to understand what those issues are and obviously get that percentage up to where it needs to be, because their target is the same as your target?
No, I don't have information on that one, so that's something that you've brought to my attention, so I'm going to take that away and investigate that, and I'll come back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.
Councillor Fleetwood.
So with regard to businesses supported, excellent, it's good news that everything's going well and there's a gold star. But as a councillor, I don't know what's actually happening within my division. Would it be practical for officers to be able to produce a list of which businesses have been supported, approached, and what the outcomes are? And if I extend that a little further and go on to the flooding issues, again, under 1.2, lots and lots of flooding Section 19 reports going on. Would it be practical to have a list of properties that have been flooded, what the outcome is, and what the resolution is? Because I'm still aware of many people out in the sticks, out in my area, who are still suffering the consequences of flooding. Yes, it's great to hear we've got more resource going into flooding, and it's great to hear things are coming forwards, but the people are still out there, and it's not many weeks away before we get to the anniversary, the annual anniversary of the first storm last year. So is it practical for either of those to go forward, please?
Thank you. I'll have to do a bit of investigation just to make sure what information we can share, but I might be able to give you a number, and then we could work with you to actually put on some awareness raising events within your vicinity as well. So I'll come back to you if that's okay, Councillor Fleetwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleetwood. Yes, with the Section 19s, while the reports are completed, we are just quality assuring them because they were completed by outside agencies through contractors. So we're making sure that they are up to spec. Once they are, all residents who've reported to us will receive a copy of a summary of that report. We obviously don't send out all the technical detail straight away. There's a lot of redaction that needs to be done to these reports as well. But if they require the full report, we can send a redacted version. Councillors will see those first.
Thank you very much for those answers. Just going back to what you said earlier, Chris, I am very mindful of Councillor Fleetwood's point that we are moving toward the anniversary of Babette and that we have not had a hot, dry summer. It is remarkable, and it's just a reminder that climate change is something that is so big that we sit here worrying about the weather and the impacts that it might have, which is not something that we used ever to have to do. Because these events were so rare that are now becoming so common. But the work that is going on is long-term work. I was speaking to a parish in my own division recently, and they were saying, well, you know, you've got your inquiry underway and all these Section 19s are going on, so we're going to be all right. And you have to try and communicate, and it's a role for all of us as members of this council, not just for officers, that there are major, major issues here that will take a long time to resolve, and the capital costs are, in some cases, absolutely humongous. And we were talking about planning earlier on. Building better, it doesn't solve what we've built already, but building better for the future, particularly with sustainable drainage systems that can cope with climate change, is absolutely vital. Right, I'm not seeing any more speakers from the floor. I'm hearing an interesting piece of music coming from outside the chamber, but we won't focus on that. So we have before us, thank you, by the way, to officers for your replies, and thank you, members, for your questions. Proposal before us is that I move the committee endorses the report and that our satisfaction be recorded on the detail of measures employed to discharge the duties and requirements of each of these council services. And secondly, I also move that the committee's feedback be shared with relevant officers and portfolio holders for their information and further actioning. Does anyone dissent? I am seeing no dissent in that case. That matter is agreed. So we now move to item 9 on the agenda, which is the committee works programme. You will find this item on pages 55 to 60 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the contents of its work programme and will be presented by Chiara Hazianu, our scrutiny officer. Chiara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As members can see, you can find our work programme from pages 54 and below, and the agenda for our next meeting, which is on the 15th of October 2024, can be found on pages 56 to 57. As you can see and appreciate, we've got a busy agenda, and I would like to add an additional item that we have been notified of today, which is the reprocurement of the bulk haulage of residual waste contract, and it is an executive decision that will be made on the 5th of November. With that caveat, there's no other changes to the work programme, and I hope members can agree to add this item on to our next month's agenda and next meeting's agenda. And if there's any further items that you're aware of or anything else that you would like to see on the work programme, please liaise with me offline. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chiara. Do we have any comments or questions from the floor? I am seeing none. In that case, we will move on to a proposal. I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 55 to 60 and the additional item which we've just had highlighted to us. Does anyone dissent from that? I'm seeing no dissent, therefore that matter is agreed. We now move, rather strangely, from item 9 to item 3, because you recall that we changed the order at the beginning of the meeting, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of July 2024. So this item is to approve and sign those minutes as a correct record, and you will find them on pages 5 to 18 of the agenda pack. I'm not going to go through them page by page. Does anybody have any comments or queries on those minutes? In which case, may I have a proposer? Councillor Fleetwood, and seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. That matter is agreed. Thank you very much indeed. With one abstention for absence. That finally brings us to the conclusion of a very interesting and important meeting. It concludes our business. I thank everybody present in the chamber for your participation. Thank you very much to everybody who has followed the live stream or indeed is time shifting and tuning in to this via our website. That now concludes the meeting, and at 12:02 I declare it closed. Thank you all.